I often find myself reflecting on the peculiarities of my life, especially when faced with the incredulous remarks of others. Riding on your parents' coattails at work and now you're just a slacker, right? These words echo in my mind, a constant reminder of the skepticism that surrounds me. At 35 years old, with a husband turning 37, and no children to show for it, I'm often questioned about the trajectory of my life. Why don't you just let go of my child? How on earth did someone like you manage to get married? The skepticism is palpable, as if my existence defies some unwritten rule. My journey into adulthood took a turn after my father's passing 6 years ago. We relocated, my mother, my husband John, and I, seeking solace in a new home. John, a beacon of kindness, seamlessly integrated into our family dynamic, bringing a sense of peace to our home. But my professional life has been a roller coaster of highs and lows. Initially, I followed the expected path, joining my father's company straight out of college. It seemed like the logical choice, after all, my whole family worked there. Electrical engineering, the family business's specialty, became my field of expertise. However, the whispers started the moment I stepped through the company doors. She's only here because of her father. The weight of expectations bore down on me, suffocating any sense of accomplishment. Despite my efforts, I couldn't shake off the stigma of nepotism. My brothers, too, faced the same scrutiny but managed to prove themselves through their abilities. Determined not to be left behind, I threw myself into my work, striving to earn recognition based on merit alone. My boss, perhaps sensing the pressure, evaluated my performance with a discerning eye, holding me to higher standards than my peers. And when I finally climbed the ladder of success, earning a well-deserved promotion, it felt bittersweet. Yes, I had proven my worth, but the shadow of doubt still lingered, tarnishing my achievements. Outside of work, my relationship with my mother-in-law and sister-in-law added another layer of complexity. Their disdain for me was thinly veiled, manifesting in snide remarks and slanderous gossip. It was exhausting, to say the least, navigating familial dynamics fraught with tension and hostility. Yet, amidst the skepticism and adversity, I find solace in the unwavering support of my husband John. His belief in me sustains me through the darkest of times, reminding me that my worth extends far beyond the confines of others' perceptions. So, as I continue to navigate the tumultuous waters of life, I hold on to the glimmer of hope that one day, my resilience will silence the doubters, and my achievements will speak for themselves. By whispers that perhaps my promotion was still not fully earned. Despite the professional strides I made, the shadow of nepotism hung heavily over me. My relationship with John, which began during my time at the company, was a bright spot in those days. John worked in a different industry altogether, in marketing, which made our conversations at home a refreshing escape from the electrical engineering world that consumed my family's life. We married after 2 years of dating, a decision that felt like the right step in our solid and supportive relationship. However, my in-laws were another story entirely. From the moment John and I announced our engagement, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law expressed their skepticism about me. How on earth did someone like you manage to get married, was a question whispered just loud enough for me to overhear at our wedding. Their attitude was clear, they thought I was not good enough for John. Their coldness was palpable, and their suspicions about my motivations for marrying into their family were hurtful. The accusations didn't stop at personal digs, they spilled over into my professional life as well. Riding on your parents' coattails at work, and now you're just a slacker, right? No kids either, why don't you just let go of my child? My sister-in-law spat during a family gathering, making it clear that she viewed my career changes and my decision not to rush into parenthood as personal failures or, worse, strategic moves to secure a comfortable life through John. Despite these challenges, I tried to maintain a peaceful home life. When my father passed away, John and I moved in with my mother to support her through her grief. John's kindness and his effort to get along with my mother created a tranquil environment at home. His support was a constant reassurance against the backdrop of my tumultuous professional life and the strained relationships with my in-laws. In my professional realm, I eventually left my father's company. The decision was driven by a deep self-reflection about where my passions truly lay. This led me to a smaller, more innovative company in the tech industry where I could work more independently and escape the stigma of nepotism. Here, I found my true calling and began to thrive, leveraging my background in electrical engineering in new and exciting ways. At this new job, I was determined to make my mark independently. The work was challenging, but it was a relief to be evaluated on my own merits rather than my family connections. Slowly but surely, I gained the respect of my new colleagues and established myself as a valuable member of the team. My efforts paid off, and I began to see real progress in my career trajectory. And thriving in my career, something she often uses as ammunition for her remarks. The persistent negativity from my in-laws became a sore point, especially since John and I were building a life together based on mutual respect and love. Despite their harsh views and accusations, John stood by me, always assuring me of his unwavering support and love. He saw my struggles and always encouraged me to focus on our relationship and the life we were building, rather than the disdain from his family. At work, my dedication continued to pay off. I immersed myself in challenging projects and innovative solutions that significantly benefited the company. My efforts were slowly but surely changing some colleagues' perceptions, who started to see me not as the CEO's daughter but as a competent and innovative engineer in my own right. This shift was gradual but noticeable, and it helped to bolster my confidence in an environment that had once been so hostile. However, the rumors and whispers never entirely disappeared. "She's only here because of her father," some would murmur, even as I led successful projects and pushed the company into new technological territories. The dichotomy between my actual performance and the perceptions some held was frustrating and disheartening. Back at home, my relationship with John continued to be my sanctuary. We often spent our evenings discussing books we were reading, planning small trips for weekends, or simply enjoying a quiet evening together. These moments were precious, creating a strong bond that no amount of external negativity could tarnish. As for dealing with my in-laws, I learned to maintain a polite but firm distance. When confronted with snide remarks, I would often respond with grace, though inside, I was struggling not to let the bitterness affect me. "I work hard for what I have, and I am qualified for my position," became a mantra I would silently repeat to myself during these encounters. Despite the difficulties, I found solace in the knowledge that my worth and my achievements were not defined by the misconceptions of others. My true value came from the hard work I put into both my career and my marriage, proving to myself, if no one else, that I was more than capable of succeeding on my own merits. The love and support from John and the recognition I gradually earned at work were the affirmations I needed to continue moving forward. And struggling to handle the mixed emotions of grief and responsibility, the situation at work became almost unbearable. The whispers that were once just irritating now felt like loud accusations, each one like a sharp jab at my already fragile state. People were quick to speculate whether my brother would treat me differently, perhaps even more leniently, which only added to my stress. The dynamic at the office shifted almost overnight. Colleagues who had shown respect for my capabilities began to question my contributions, assuming that any future successes I might have would be attributed to favoritism by my brother. Despite my brother's integrity and his clear stance on meritocracy, the murmurs persisted. It was disheartening to realize that no matter how hard I worked or how much I achieved, some would always see me through the lens of nepotism. Home life was my refuge, yet even that was tinged with the stress brought on by my interactions with my in-laws. The constant jibes from my sister-in-law, coupled with the subtle digs from my mother-in-law, began to weigh heavily on me. Their facade of civility would vanish the moment we were away from public eyes, replaced by cold stares and whispered criticisms. Despite the support from John, who saw the toll these interactions were taking on me and often stood up in my defense, the familial tension was a continuous drain on my well-being. During one particularly tense visit, I decided to confront the issue head-on. After a particularly harsh comment from my sister-in-law about my professional life, I calmly explained how her perceptions were not only hurtful, but fundamentally misguided. "I've earned my place through hard work and dedication, just as anyone else at any company should," I said firmly, maintaining eye contact. The assumptions you make not only undermine my efforts, but also insult the professional integrity of those who work with me, including your brother." The room fell silent. It was one of the few times I addressed the issue so directly, and while it did not immediately change her behavior, it felt empowering to stand up for myself. In these challenging times, my personal projects became a sanctuary. I delved deeper into the tech innovations I was passionate about, often working late into the night on new ideas that could potentially revolutionize aspects of our business. These projects not only helped me regain a sense of control over my professional life, but also provided a much-needed distraction from the emotional chaos of my personal interactions. As I navigated through these complexities, my love for John and my passion for my work acted as my beacons, guiding me through the stormy weather of family drama and workplace challenges. While the road was rough, and the journey far from over, I found strength in my accomplishments and solace in the arms of my husband, hopeful that with time, understanding, and patience, I could turn these adversities into stepping stones for personal growth and professional respect. It wasn't always steady. The transition from a well-established career in electrical engineering to the unpredictable world of writing was daunting, yet profoundly liberating. Each day brought its own set of challenges and triumphs, but the fulfillment I felt from creating something entirely my own was incomparable. My typical day involved a disciplined routine. I would wake up early, sometimes before dawn, when the world was still quiet, to write. This quiet time became my most productive and creative period. The stories I wrote were often inspired by the snippets of life I had experienced or imagined, enriched by the extensive reading I had always loved. Finding my voice as a writer took time. I experimented with various genres, from mystery to science fiction, and even dabbled in some non-fiction, drawing on my technical background when it felt right. The feedback from early readers was mixed, but every piece of criticism was a tool for improvement. I learned to cherish constructive feedback as it pushed me to refine my craft further. My husband, John, was incredibly supportive. He read my drafts, offered feedback, and encouraged me when I doubted myself. His belief in my potential as a writer bolstered my confidence. "You have a unique voice," he would say, "and your stories are captivating. Keep going." His support was not just emotional but practical too. He helped me set up a small home office, which became my sanctuary, filled with books and notes, where I could write undisturbed. The struggle to gain recognition in the literary world was real. I faced numerous rejections from publishers and literary agents, which was disheartening. However, I persisted, reminding myself that many successful authors faced similar setbacks in their early careers. I attended writers' workshops, joined online forums, and networked with other writers, which not only improved my writing but also slowly built a network of contacts who could help me navigate the industry. Gradually, my efforts began to pay off. I published a few short stories in literary magazines, and eventually, one of my novels caught the eye of a small but respected publisher. The moment I held the first printed copy of my book was indescribable, a mix of disbelief and pride. It was a modest success, but a success nonetheless, validating my decision to change careers. Through writing, I found not just a profession, but a passion that resonated deeply with my soul. It healed the wounds inflicted by years of corporate battles and familial misunderstandings. Writing gave me a voice that no one could discredit or undermine. It was mine alone, earned through persistence, creativity, and the courage to follow a path less traveled. Each story I penned brought me closer to understanding myself and the world around me, providing a sense of accomplishment and peace that I had never experienced in my previous career. As I sat down to write another chapter of my latest novel, the weight of the words from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law echoed in my mind, undercutting my focus. I reflected on the journey that had brought me here, to this point of being a successful novelist, despite their skepticism and disparaging remarks. Initially, my decision to pursue writing full-time was met with raised eyebrows and doubt, even from those closest to me, except for my staunch allies, my mother and my husband. Starting out, the transition wasn't smooth. My income was negligible, making me feel insecure and doubtful of my own abilities. However, with perseverance, the tides began to turn in the fourth year of my career when one of my novels not only won an award but was also published. This milestone marked a significant turn in my career trajectory, enabling me to secure a contract with a reputable publishing house. The stability this contract brought was a game changer, providing me with a consistent flow of projects and significantly easing my financial instability. By the fifth year, propelled by the success of a hit novel, my earnings surpassed even my husband's substantial salary. This achievement wasn't just a personal victory, it was a vindication against the doubts cast by others about my career choice. My work began to be adapted into various formats, comics and television dramas, further solidifying my reputation in the literary community. This expansion kept me incredibly busy, but ensured that my income remained steady and growing. Despite the external success, the journey was fraught with personal challenges and naysayers, particularly from my in-laws. After the passing of my father-in-law, their remarks grew even more pointed and harsh. They saw me spending days on end at home, writing and researching, and labeled me a nerd, using the term derogatorily to imply that I was out of touch and lazy. Their jealousy was palpable, especially regarding the luxurious high-rise condo I lived in, a property that, unbeknownst to them, came from my own inheritance, not my husband's earnings. This misconception about my financial contribution to our household persisted despite my best efforts to clarify the situation. My in-laws remained convinced that I was financially dependent on my husband, a notion that gnawed at me. Their unyielding stance and behind-the-back comments were a source of considerable stress, yet I bore them silently, choosing not to confront the issue directly in an effort to maintain peace. Amidst this familial strife, another personal worry plagued me, the issue of not having children. Turning 30 had triggered unsolicited comments about starting a family, and now at 35, the pressure and remarks had intensified. My husband and I had hoped for children, but it hadn't happened yet, and the constant reminders from my in-laws only added to the stress. Throughout these challenges, the unwavering support from my mother and husband was my rock. They both encouraged me to focus on my passion and to overlook the negativity as much as possible. In times of overwhelming criticism, I sought their counsel, which provided me with the strength to continue. Their belief in me bolstered my resolve to persevere, to prove not just to my critics but to myself that I had made the right choice in following my dream, no matter the obstacles. Reflecting on past difficulties and determined not to repeat them, I made a conscious decision to address issues with my in-laws more proactively. Learning from my previous job experience, where I had bottled up my frustrations until I reached a breaking point, I realized the importance of early intervention. However, knowing the delicate nature of familial relations, especially since my in-laws maintained a facade of decency around my husband, I chose to discuss these matters with him in the gentlest terms possible. "You don't need to get involved directly, I'll handle our interactions," I assured him, hoping to shield him from unnecessary conflict while keeping him informed. My husband, aware of my previous emotional turmoil caused by the backbiting, became a protective buffer. He managed our interactions to minimize my exposure to their snide remarks, and his efforts did make a difference. Although their malice occasionally seeped through, causing me distress, the knowledge that I had staunch allies in my husband and my mother helped me recover my spirits swiftly. Concerning the matter of children, my mother, who had experienced motherhood later in life, offered comforting words, "There's no need to rush. It's just not the right time yet. I had you later in my life, so there's no reason to worry." Her reassurance gave me peace, allowing me to approach the issue with less urgency, despite the ongoing pressure from my in-laws. With my current workload and the persistent negativity from them, I felt that adding the responsibility of a child might be too much. This decision, while difficult, was one I had come to terms with, choosing to focus on maintaining my mental stability and nurturing my career. Living in the well-designed, strategically located house left to us by my father provided a sanctuary. My husband, mother, and I enjoyed a relatively peaceful existence. The house's amenities, including gym equipment and a dedicated workspace in the shared facilities, allowed me to maintain a healthy balance between work and personal life, aiding significantly in managing stress. However, tranquility was abruptly shattered the day my vibrant and seemingly healthy mother collapsed and passed away from a stroke. She had been her usual energetic self that morning, and I had cheerfully waved her off, never suspecting it would be our last goodbye. The shock was profound. I was utterly unprepared for the news when I arrived at the hospital to find that she had already passed. Seeing her there, appearing as if she had merely fallen asleep, sent waves of disbelief coursing through me. It didn't seem real. As I went through the motions of arranging her funeral, the reality of her absence slowly sank in, and in the quiet moments that followed, I finally allowed myself to grieve deeply for the loss of my dear mother. I decided to channel my grief into the one thing that had always brought me comfort and purpose: writing. Despite the aching loss that enveloped me, I knew that burying myself in my work would be a tribute to her memory, considering how much she had always supported and believed in my passion. So, with a heavy heart but a determined spirit, I resumed my routine, sitting at my desk surrounded by the familiar clutter of notes and manuscripts. The quiet of the house, once filled with my mother's presence, now seemed deafening, each tick of the clock a stark reminder of her absence. Yet, as I began to type, each word steadied me slightly more than the last. Writing had a way of anchoring me, pulling me back from the brink of my emotions, offering a semblance of normalcy amidst the turmoil. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law's earlier words at the funeral lingered unpleasantly in the back of my mind. Their crass insinuations about my dependency on my mother and their stingy attitude toward the condolence money were hard to shake off. However, I consciously chose to set aside those thoughts during my writing hours, focusing on the characters and plots that needed to be fleshed out rather than dwelling on their cruelty. The challenge was not just emotional, but also professional. The deadline was looming, and I had promised the publishing house to deliver on time. They had been accommodating, understanding the personal crisis I was dealing with, but I knew I couldn't rely on their patience indefinitely. My mother had always taught me the importance of responsibility and the value of keeping one's word, principles I intended to uphold in her honor. As I worked, I found a strange comfort in the world I created on paper. It was a world where I had control, where the characters might suffer, triumph, or find peace, guided by the strokes of my pen. This control was a stark contrast to the helplessness I felt in managing my grief or changing the attitudes of my in-laws. With each passing day, the manuscript began to take shape, and with it, a small part of the void left by my mother's passing was filled. The act of creating, of putting thoughts and emotions into words, was therapeutic. It allowed me to express my sorrow in a way that was both productive and healing. Even as I missed her terribly, I could almost feel my mother's encouragement, urging me on, proud of my resilience and dedication. In these moments, the connection I felt to her was as strong as it had ever been, a testament to the enduring influence she had on my life, both in her presence and now, profoundly, in her absence. Attempting to calm the surreal situation that had suddenly descended upon us, my husband took the lead, his voice firm yet controlled. Firstly, the condo isn't mine. It was inherited by Karen from her father, not from her mother, and certainly not from me, he clarified, aiming to correct their misguided assumptions once and for all. And Karen isn't just lounging around at home, she's a successful novelist, a profession that requires just as much dedication and hard work as any other. The diner's ambient noise seemed to dim as we faced off across the table, the absurdity of the situation making it almost seem like a bizarre dream. The insistence from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law that they had rights to move into my home was not only inappropriate but completely baseless. They continued to argue their point with a confidence that was both infuriating and pitiful. It's logical for us to live there. Now that your mother is gone, Karen, the house should serve the family, my sister-in-law added, as if this explained everything. As they laid out their deluded plans, I felt a mixture of emotions swirling inside me: anger, disbelief, and an unexpected surge of resolve. The mention of my mother and their dismissive reference to me as a nerd were particularly painful, but these jabs also fortified my resolve not to let their ignorance and greed disrupt the life I had built. We need to clear up a few things, I said, my voice steady despite the churn of emotions. First, this house is my property, legally left to me by my father. It has nothing to do with my husband's finances or my mother's past contributions. Secondly, you are not entitled to decide where you live based on whims or unfounded claims. My husband nodded, supporting each point. Moreover, moving in with us is not an option. This isn't just about ownership, it's about respecting our lives and the choices we make as a family, which right now involves just Karen and myself. They looked taken aback, perhaps not expecting such a firm resistance or clear explanation of the facts. The idea that they could simply claim ownership and disrupt our lives was met with a definitive boundary that my husband and I presented unitedly. As we finished our drinks, the initial shock of their proposal gave way to a clearer perspective on how to handle the situation. We agreed that further discussions would be necessary, to involve legal advice if needed, to ensure that boundaries were respected and that such absurd demands would not surface again. Leaving the diner, my husband squeezed my hand, a silent reassurance of his unwavering support and love. As we headed home, the earlier grief and shock began to settle into a quiet determination. Whatever challenges might come, we would face them together, standing firm against any who would disrupt the peace and stability we cherished in our lives. Hearing their predicament only added to the absurdity of the situation. My sister-in-law and mother-in-law had acted so impulsively, selling their own home under the assumption they could just move into ours without consent. It was reckless, and now they were in a real bind. They had appended their own lives, based on a fantastical plan that hadn't been grounded in any reality. I stood there, astounded by the sheer irresponsibility of their actions. It was difficult to muster sympathy for the self-inflicted predicament they found themselves in. They looked at us with wide, pleading eyes, desperation evident in their voices as they implored us to reconsider, to let them move in with us to save face, and because they had nowhere else to go. My husband, visibly shaken by the revelation and their brazenness, stood his ground. This is not just about a place to stay. This is about respect and boundaries. You made a decision without consulting us, assuming you could just take over our lives and our home. That's not acceptable, he declared with a firmness that left no room for ambiguity. The air around us was tense, the earlier commotion at the diner now seeming trivial compared to the drama unfolding before us. I could see the panic set in deeper as they realized the gravity of their mistake. My sister-in-law, having quit her job in anticipation of a new life in our condo, was particularly distressed. Despite the turmoil they had caused, there was a part of me that understood the direness of their situation. "Look," I said, trying to inject some reason into the conversation, "you can't stay with us. That's not going to happen. But we will help you find a temporary place until you sort this out." My offer was more generous than I felt, given their earlier insults and assumptions. Yet, it was important to me that we handle this situation with as much grace and dignity as possible, despite their lack of the same. My husband nodded in agreement, relieved that I was taking a compassionate stance. "We'll help you look for rentals starting tomorrow. You can stay in a hotel for a few nights, on us, until you find something more permanent." Their faces showed a mix of relief and embarrassment. They had expected anger and outright rejection, but here we were, offering a lifeline, despite everything. It was clear this was not the resolution they had hoped for, but it was the one they had to accept. As we wrapped up our discussion, the weight of their misjudgment and our decision to help nonetheless was palpable. We left the diner not with the closeness that familial ties should bring, but with a clear delineation of respect and personal boundaries. It was a sobering reminder of the complexities of family dynamics and the importance of clear communication and mutual respect. With the discovery of my pregnancy, a profound sense of peace and purpose enveloped me. Despite the recent turmoil caused by my in-laws, the news of the new life growing inside me filled my days with renewed energy and focus. This glimmer of hope was like a beacon in the fog, guiding me through the remnants of the familial storm. I was determined to create a nurturing environment for my child, one filled with love and security, much like the one my own mother had provided for me. As I moved forward, balancing the anticipation of motherhood with my writing, I became even more invested in my characters and stories. Writing had always been a refuge, but now it took on a deeper significance. It was not only a profession, but also a legacy I hoped to pass on to my child, the value of creativity and hard work. However, the tranquility of my daily routine was still occasionally disrupted by attempts from my in-laws to reconnect. Their messages, filled with pleas and apologies, continued to flood our phones and emails. After consulting with my husband, who had steadfastly supported my decision to block their numbers, we maintained our stance of minimal contact. It was a necessary boundary to protect our growing family and our mental well-being. Their situation, as they relayed through various messages before being blocked, became increasingly dire. The reality of their hastily made decision to sell their family home and the subsequent challenges of living in a less desirable apartment, compounded by the difficulty of finding steady employment, painted a clear picture of their desperation. They were scraping by, working multiple part-time jobs, a far cry from the comfortable life they had envisioned at our expense. The irony of the situation was not lost on me. They had mocked me for my career as a novelist, seeing it as unstable and insubstantial, yet here I was, thriving and expanding my family, while they struggled with the repercussions of their own misguided actions. This contrast only solidified my resolve to focus on my own family's future rather than dwell on their misfortunes. As I moved further along in my pregnancy, the excitement about the baby grew. I found myself often touching my belly, whispering words of love and encouragement to my unborn child. The connection I felt was indescribable, a mix of awe, excitement, and a bit of nervousness about the kind of mother I would be. I wanted to provide my child with the same strength and inspiration my mother had given me, ensuring they always felt safe and loved. Continuing my work as a novelist, I channeled my experiences into my writing, enriching my narratives with the depth of my own emotional journeys. The challenges I had faced with my in-laws, though painful, had given me a new perspective on family dynamics, which I wove into my stories, adding layers of realism and empathy. As I looked forward to the arrival of my baby, my life felt like a book with its pages still being written, a story of resilience, love, and the unbreakable bonds of family I was eager to build with my husband and our child. With each day, I grew more excited about the future, grateful for the peace that had returned to our lives, and the endless possibilities that